Anne Campbell. Councillor Anne Campbell, no longer Anne Campbell, journalist and columnist. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, thank you, Marissa.
You were here with us last week, but you were here in a different guise.
Yes.
You're here in an official capacity this morning. You were recently co-opted onto Louth County Council for Sinn Féin, one of two councillors who co-opted. First of all, congratulations. Secondly, we were surprised. and I have to ask, I'm going to get it out of the way, Anne, is, they're not an element of the poacher turned gamekeeper
yes.
here? Yeah.
You're not the first person to say that. And there is a wee element of that, but the job that I've had in the Argus for 11 years and 9 years in other papers before that, I got to see how the council worked. I got to see people were coming to us with the issues that they were raising, and we were trying to help them as well. So politics was always something that was part of the job. Anyway, whether that be going out with election candidates or covering elections, local elections, referenda, all those things. So I was always very interested in it, and I hope it's a good step. I think it's a natural step. A lot of journalists, like to stay outside the fray, but I decided that I wanted to get my sleeves rolled up and get stuck in and give this a go when the opportunity arose.
Yeah, I suppose, in many respects it's a natural progression. And when I said, we're surprised and all of that, poacher, gamekeeper stuff, you were also on the record as saying here, and I know you won't mind me referring to this, prior to, I think it was the last election, that the election count was your favourite day of the year, and that you were going off to get your hair done, and
yes,
you were bought a new outfit.
Absolutely.
So, in that respect, you could see that, politics excited you, you enjoyed everything around it, and therefore it shouldn't really have been a surprise. I think it's probably, as you said, that the journalists and commentators are usually on the periphery, and if they do sort of enter the fray, it's as the doctors of spin.
Yes.
They're in there for,
yes.
their PR abilities and their ability to actually, disseminate the information the way that the parties necessarily want it. But you have actually, I'm going to put myself in the front line.
Yes, I'm going to put myself in the front line. And look, a lot of colleagues that I've had over the years have gone into PR, and some of them have even gone into communications offices for political parties. And, that's their choice. This is a lot more... being a councillor is a lot more front line, and it's a lot more, you're not in a bubble. You're not in a ivory tower in Dublin or Belfast or wherever. You're on the ground, meeting people, talking to people, listening to people. And that was one of my favourite parts of being a reporter as well, was to be out on the streets, talking to people, listening to people, and trying to help people. So the PR thing, I don't really understand it, to be honest with you. Sometimes, and look, it's to me, younger people coming up behind me, people who are 15, 20 years younger than me, they could blind you with how they can do stuff on social media and work out all the algorithms and all these things. They can run campaigns through Facebook and all that there. That's of no interest to me, really. But I do feel that I am able to be much more up front and to be in front of people, listening to people and talking to people.
And that ability to talk, but very importantly to listen, which is what you have to do as a journalist, because you need to take that information and you need to impart it properly, but you've got to, if you like, make it yours. So it's whereas people will often complain or argue that the politicians, they don't actually listen. They might be standing there and they're smiling but they're not taking in what you have to say. So I suppose you're at something of an advantage starting out in that that's ingrained.
Yeah, I would hope so, because as you say, the part of the job that I've had was to try and people come in and talk to you in the Argus, as and sometimes they're very upset about something that's happened to them, or something that they feel they've been wronged by, and you have to take them and listen to what they're saying and try and pick out the bits that you're able to help them with. And then, the other skill I hope I have is listening to both sides, because while as a reporter you would put people's views across, you also have to be fair to whether that's the county council that they're complaining about, or the HSE, or about a business, or about, you know, something that they feel as wrong. You have to ask the other people, and there's always two sides to every story, and to try and balance that. So that's something that I hope I not only listen to people who are coming with problems and complaints and worries and concerns, but also to listen to what the other side, whether obviously to be the council, have to say about it, and to try and find a way through for both people, and hopefully that's what I'll be able to do.
And you know, along with that, the balance, there has to be the verification aspect of it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you can't afford to let lies and fake news seep in. Because
and it's, as you say, you're absolutely right. It is about checking the facts and trying to get and communicating those facts to people, because sometimes, you know, the county council, no matter how well intentioned they are, can be very full of jargon and legalese, and you know, and for ordinary people, even for me, you know, the way things are set out and the way things are communicated to people, you know, that can be very difficult. And people, you know, that's what the councillors are for, is to try and get people to who they need to get to, and get them a resolution to their problems.
I think in fairness to you, Anne, and you know, it's probably not always going to be fair from here on out, because you're a politician now and you're in the firing line, but you were always what people would regard as a bit of a crusading journalist, in that, you know, you would take stories and maybe stories that other people either weren't interested in because they weren't glamorous enough, or, you know, but stories that sort of tugged at your heartstrings, you would run with them, and you would, you know, try and do something for these people.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, relatively recently there was Woodland Park, and the evictions at Woodland Park, and you know, in the last couple of years that was the, you know, travellers' rights and how they are treated by the authorities. It was something that I kept at it and kept at it and kept at it, and I you know, and as the story went along, I was appalled by how they were being treated, and you know, what happened to them and all that type of thing. And you know, I've good relationships in that community, and that's something that I want to be involved in. I was able to be co-opted onto the Traveller Accommodation Consultative Committee as well. Whenever I got to be a councillor for Dundalk South, that's one of the committees that I asked to be on, because there was a vacancy there, so that's what I wanted to do. But you know, it's, you know, travellers' issues aren't glamorous, you know, and they're controversial, and but it's definitely something that hopefully now I'll be able to actually do things, rather than just write about them, actually make a difference.
Is that where this came from? Because I know as part of your duties as a journalist, you would have attended and reported on first of all of the council meetings, and then you spent a lot of time in the courts as well, you know, where you were looking at sometimes, you know, a direct result of social deprivation, or and so was that what inspired you, that you thought, no, it's not good enough here to sit here and write about it, that I have to...
That definitely. And I found myself in the last couple of years, you know, sitting at council meetings, you know, talking to myself and saying, this is wrong, what are you know, but I obviously keeping my mouth shut, but you know, finding that I had more and more to say myself about what was taking place and what was happening, and you know, say something around the cycle lanes. I would have had strong personal views about how all that was handled, and I just found myself over the last couple of years finding that I had more to say. Maybe I think it is because I'm older, and I think it's because whenever you reach a certain age, especially as a woman, I realised in the last couple of years, no, I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy with my views. I'm able to stand over what I think, you know, because sometimes whenever I was younger, I used to, you know, you think things and then reality comes along and, you know, you say to yourself, oh no, you modify those views. So I found myself more and more consistently thinking that it was time to stop writing and start doing.
Start doing?
Yeah.
Which is what you did.
Yes.
Your choice of party. You know, there was, and that's the other thing, and as a journalist, I think, you know, having read you and having had you comment in here on a number of occasions on different political subjects, I always felt you were very fair to everybody, you know, so I never would have got a hint that, oh, and this way or that way, or that's where its sympathies lies. You know, to me, you seem to take every politician, whether they were local or national, on face value, and, you know, you left aside what party they came from. But, you know, if they had something that they brought forward that you agreed with, you would say it. If you didn't agree with it, you would in turn say that as well. But you've very much sort of, you know, nailed your colour to the mast now. We know exactly what colours they are. Sinn Féin.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't have made any secret if anybody had asked me straight out what party I support. You know, local politicians would have known where my sympathies lay, but they were gracious enough. A lot of the politicians were gracious enough to understand that me as a person and my own political views didn't and couldn't impact on the work that I did. So I think if you asked other councillors or TDs, was I fair to them, I think they would say yes, I was. But when there was absolutely no question that Sinn Féin was going to be the party that I was going to join, and that's the background that I come from. I'm from the north of Ireland, and been living in the Dundalk over 20 years, and I've seen the party, north and south, and I agree with them. I agree with them on the major issues, and the team that they have on Louth County Council, there's 10 councillors, and they are, and I know it sounds like the Rose of Tralee, and I'm going to say it like the Rose of Tralee, they are incredible. They are incredible people. They've made me feel so welcome. Some of them I'd never met before, a couple of councillors in Drogheda that I'd never met before. They have been so welcoming and so kind and helpful, and there's a really good bond there, because we're all working towards the same thing. They're the largest grouping on Louth County Council. They do an awful lot of work. They're very, very dedicated, and so are lots of the vast majority of all the other councillors, you know. And it's hard work. It is hard work to get through all the paperwork, and we talked before we came on air about the paperwork and everything, and the party have been extraordinarily good, and I was not a member of the party before this process. I joined the day after my birthday on the 9th of August. I have my card in my bag that said start date the 9th of August, and I was never involved, but in the party or member of the party. But I was always interested in the issues that they raised, because a lot of them were the ones, as you say, that tugged at my heartstrings too.
Now, when you say the issues, Anne, you know, I suppose I'm going to have to ask you the issues, because there's a lot of people that would associate Sinn Féin with one big issue, and then other people will recognise, well, no, you know, there's a lot of other things at the moment that mean a lot to them. So I suppose, you know, if you could just elaborate on what the issues are that really drew you to the party. Well,
I think one of the other things about the timing of this move for me is the Brexit. Obviously the party are in talks in Belfast at the moment. They've been going on for months, and trying to get that set up, and how the border's going to be managed, how it's going to be implemented. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Everything's up at the air at the moment. Irish unity continues to be at the heart of everything that the party does, and that's one thing that I have found over the last few years, that political parties who claim to be Republican, or who have who tip their cap to the people in the north, don't then, whenever they come up with policies, whether they be health policies or environment policies, or all 26 county policies, they don't look at all Ireland, and everything the party does, Sinn Féin do, is on an all Ireland basis, and that to me is really important, because there's so many people in the north of Ireland who think that people down here don't care. Health is my personal major concern. It's something that I've been covering in Dundalk for years and years and years, and I know that the HSE would have been happy to get rid of me out of the Argus, but unfortunately I will continue to be knocking on their door. And to talk about, just very quickly, local issues, like the minor injury unit at the Louth County Hospital continues to to be prohibited to children under 14. And I remember 18 months ago, as a reporter in the Argus, I sat with Simon Harris up at the Louth County Hospital, and I asked him, and he was great. I think we talked about it relatively shortly afterwards, about how good he was, and he said, yeah, this is something that we can do. This should happen. It hasn't happened yet, and nobody knows why. And I know that Jerry Adams put in a couple of parliamentary questions over the last few months asking, no reply from the HSE. And in fairness to Simon Harris, he said, well, that's a HSE matter, yet I will refer you back to and he has referred the question on to the HSE, but sure, they've got no response for anybody. So that's something I want to be looking at as well. And the obviously homelessness. Mm-hmm. Homelessness is it's just extraordinary what's happening in Dundalk, with not only people on the housing list who are now in emergency accommodation. There are nearly 5,000 people on the housing list in Louth County Council, and it's just creeping up all the time. And the other problem is that those who are in Louth County Council tenancy and in paying rent on the home, some of them are way behind in their rent. There's a whole problem there with rent being miscalculated, and over the last few years in Dundalk, and how that's been rectified, and people have been hit with bills for thousands of pounds, and they have to pay these arrears, and all that has to be sorted out. The drugs problem in Dundalk continues to be. It's growing and growing and growing all the time. So that's something those are the kind of the areas that I'd like to focus on in the next 18 months.
The drugs problem, and I suppose that does get down to policing, and when we're into an area that probably goes beyond the remit of Louth County Council. Housing is something that we would have thought is within your power and your the council's power to change, and yet it appears that's not the case. And I know last week I spoke to somebody who ran as a candidate for another party in this area in the general election, and I is a representative of another party, and he was bemoaning the fact that the local authorities don't really have any power when it comes to any of this anymore. So what his party are looking for is for the 2014 Act to be overturned and to give back some power to the local authorities.
And that's something that I would agree with, because it is amazing how much power has been stripped from the local authorities in that 2014 Local Government Act. The issue is it comes down to will. It comes down to will. I don't believe there's a problem with money, because the council are paying hand over fist to hundreds of thousands every year to pay for people in emergency accommodation. They're also paying hundreds of thousands on the housing assistance payments. That's not a good way of spending money. So it's to me a question of will. They have acres and acres and acres of land banks that they are paying, and we heard at the council meeting that I first attended on the 18th of September, it was a throwaway line by the chief executive saying that they're paying around €1 million on interest every year on the loans that they took to buy the land banks that they haven't built a house on. And come the end of this year, they'll have to start, that interest only period is over, and they'll have to start paying the interest on the capital back. So there's another few $100,000 having to be paid as well. That is not a good way of doing things. It's not a good way of ensuring that this list starts to come down. The local authority need to build houses. Simple as. They did before. They can do it again. Absolutely.
So effectively, what you're saying to me is that the money is there. It's just not being spent in
my opinion, no, in the way that it should.
And do you think, Anne, and again, there's been a suggestion that, and you mentioned HAP, that it's because it suits certain people, possibly outside of Dundalk, and possibly people in power outside of Dundalk, to have this very viable private rented sector that includes subvention from the government and local authorities.
And it's only viable one way. It's not viable for people who rent.
Oh, absolutely not.
I rent my own house. I don't own my own house. I have a private landlord, and my rent is creeping up a little. There's, he's not gouging or anything like it. But if something happened to him and we had to leave our home, I now could not afford the rent that has been asked in for private accommodation in Louth or in Dundalk. It is extraordinary. €1,200 for a house in Bay Estate, to rent a house in Bay Estate. It is completely unattainable. I work, my husband works, and we would not be able to afford it. It is... It makes me so cross that, you know, as you say, there are vested interests who think that it's okay to keep handing money over to not only to private landlords but to hotels, B&Bs and all these other places that provide and paying top dollar, can I add as well, emergency accommodation whenever there's absolutely no need for it. If the local authority decided we can build houses, let's start building houses themselves, whether that be through a public-private partnership with a contractor, whether they do it themselves. But we can no longer have a situation, Marissa, where we're paying €1 million on a year, €1 million a year on land that has been bought specifically for housing, and not one house has been built on it. And we're going to be paying more next year. And
why is somebody sitting on that land? Are they sitting on that in the hope that, okay, we bought it for this, but, you know, we bought it at a knockdown price, and then in a few years' time, if things keep going the way they're going, we can sell it for this?
But that was never what this was for. That was never what this was for. This was ring-fenced land.
Okay.
Literally fenced off land for housing. This is not land that can be used for factories or used for, you know, to build a community centre, whatever. Mm-hmm. This is land specifically for housing, and the loan that the local authorities got to buy this land is specifically for, it has to be used for housing. But yet, rather than start a process where we go out and look for people to build houses for, we just continue to sit on it.
But why? Has anyone asked why? That's, you know,
exactly. I don't understand the reasoning behind it. They say we don't have the money. We don't have the money to build houses. We don't have, you know.
But they have the money to
pay the interest.
And the money to pay emergency accommodation. So it doesn't really. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So we need a new accountant. I don't know.
I don't know. We just like I say, and come back to the original point. It's the will.
Yeah.
It's will. We need a new will, and we need people in the councils to understand that they are responsible for providing people with homes. They are responsible for it. It's not the government. It's them. If somebody has a problem, if somebody is in need of emergency accommodations, the local authority they go to. They don't go down to the Department of Environment in Dublin looking for housing. They go to their local authority. That's what they're tasked to do. The money is there. They're not spending it properly.
See, this all seems, you know, very simple to me.
I know.
And high finance and we don't go hand in
Don't
hand
know me
at
either.
all.
No.
But,
no.
you know, it's like what we call, or the kids would call a no-brainer. So why is no-brain being employed to, you know, just... But then I think, Anne... You probably, I asked you earlier why you made this jump, and you explained that you were sitting down listening, talking to yourself, and these are probably the questions you wanted to ask. So, you know,
and that's what I'd love to find out. I'd love to hear the reason why, and I'd love to, you know, get the council to begin to see reason with this, because, as you say, financially it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense why the cost. And to go back to one of the other points, why the cost of children, the sending or taking children down to Drogheda, to a place that's already overcrowded, the hospital, and, you know, not being able to provide the service on their doorstep for little things. This isn't, you know, for children with serious ongoing major trauma or illnesses or major trauma. This is for, you know, they need a couple of stitches. Mm-hmm. They, you know, all the stuff the kids that happen.
The everyday stuff. And it is unfortunately everyday, but it's not life-threatening, it's not...
And I live 2 minutes walk from the Louth County, and if something happened to my children, I'm not able to take them there because they're 10 and 8. And, you know, that's what infuriates me. It's not about the money, because it costs more to treat them in Drogheda, to get them sent to Drogheda, to get all the, you know, and put them into a place that's already overcrowded. It's management, and it comes down to management. And it's, as you say, a no-brainer as to why people in Dundalk don't have a service for children. The minor injuries unit, and the emphasis is on minor injuries. This is not for a major incident or trauma. Obviously, they have to go to Drogheda or somewhere else. This is just for the usual, the bumps, the cuts, the scrapes, you know, and they can't get that, and that drives me nuts.
And you mentioned that there's a few people down the HSE were just absolutely delighted to get rid of you.
I'm sure they are.
As a journalist, I think there might be a few people down in Millennium Hall at the moment going, "Can we get onto the HSE and find out how they did that one?" You know?
Just to try and ignore me. That's
where can we pass her on to now? Because really, she's coming our way, and they're not going to like it. But you know, it's not about what they like. It's about the people. I know you will know a lot of your constituents because of your work in the Argus, but I'm sure you'll be out there over the next few weeks getting to
absolutely, yes. Next week we're hitting the doors to come into a doorstep near you. Your new councillor for Dundalk South, and there's obviously a lot of people that I've never had any interaction with that I don't know, but who are party supporters, who are voters, who are people who have all the issues that they have in their lives, and I'd like to be able to help them. So meet as many as possible. I've no problem with that. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, well, she is coming to a doorstep near you in the coming weeks. Anne Campbell, Councillor Anne Campbell, thank you so much, and I know we'll be talking to you lots more over the next few years.